How every AFC team can win the Super Bowl this season. Whether you're a fan of a contender or a bottom feeder, we could all use some optimism. So let's dive into the absolute best case scenario for every team, as unrealistic as some of them may be. As you might have guessed, this is part 1 of 2. I'll be doing the NFC in another video, but let's get into every team in the AFC division by division. The Kansas City Chiefs. Nothing, the same thing they've been doing? I don't know. Look, it's not exactly a Herculean task to figure out how this team could win the Super Bowl since they just did it, so all we can really do is look at what's changed. The Chiefs will head into this season with a new left and right tackle after letting Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley go, while bringing in Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith. So how can the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? These two guys protect Patrick Mahomes like their lives depend on it and give him time to be the cybernetic wizard from another dimension that we've all seen for the past 5 seasons. Kansas City also lost 2 wide receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman, so they'll need Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore to pick up the slack, but then again, maybe not, because I'm pretty sure Mahomes can turn my grandma into a productive receiver if he really wanted to. The formula for the Chiefs winning another championship is simple. Do more of the same, don't f up the line. The Los Angeles Chargers. Kellen Moore takes this offense to another level, the roster stops being a hospital, and they stop choking like an unsupervised toddler playing with Legos. Justin Herbert and Kellen Moore actually starred in some car commercials together, along with Leighton Vander Esch for some reason. And if their chemistry in football is half as good as it was in these ads, then Herbert and the Chargers offense may finally get back on track. But getting Herbert back to form actually isn't the biggest barrier to this team winning a Super Bowl. The Chargers need to stay healthy, especially on defense. Yes, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams spend their fair share of time on the sidelines, but Joey Bosa, JC Jackson, and Austin Johnson all missed significant time last year. The Chargers have one of the most talented rosters in football. They just need their guys to stay on the field. And then, once Herbert and the Chargers offense becomes elite and their roster checks out of Weenie Hut General, the cherry on top of this Chargers Super Bowl Sunday is that they need to stop choking. Just win the games you're supposed to win, especially when you basically won them already. The Las Vegas Raiders make opposing quarterbacks poop their pants with the most disruptive pass rush in the NFL, and Jimmy Garoppolo ends up being an upgrade over Derek Carr instead of a lateral move. As a Patriots fan, saying lateral in regards to the Raiders just brought up some bad memories. The Raiders have a very nice skill group with Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs leading the charge, supported by Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow, and newly drafted Michael Mayer. But their biggest potential advantage over other teams is a pass rush so terrifying that it could hit Russell Wilson back to 2012. Actually, wait, they don't want to do that. My point is, by adding Tyree Wilson to a line that already has Max Crosby and Chandler Jones on it, Vegas is clearly putting a focus on pressuring the quarterback. And if they want to contend, they'll need that investment to pay off. I know Jimmy G will be hoping to have an elite defense since he's been so used to it for so many years. But either way, he also needs to do his job. And his job is to put the ball in harm's way less than Derek Carr. So Jimmy, protect that football, get it to your good players, let your defense wreak havoc, and see where it gets you. The Denver Broncos. Sean Payton does some voodoo magic and gets Russell Wilson back to what he was in Seattle, or at least like 70% of it. I had such high hopes for this team last year. I thought Russ to Denver was the new Stafford to LA, the new Brady to Tampa, where the team just needed a great quarterback and it would push them over the edge. And maybe I was right. Maybe all they did need was a great quarterback. But we'll never know, because Russ was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. That also definitely wasn't all they needed. Nathaniel Hackett was an abomination. But now they have Sean Payton, and if anyone can turn Russ around or at least squeeze out whatever productivity is still buried deep inside him, Peyton's the guy. Obviously, a healthy Javonte Williams would help the cause too, but on the other side of the ball, they're actually in decent shape. This defense allowed the 7th fewest yards in the league, which isn't a surprise to anyone who followed the Broncos last year, because while most of their games were gross, they were low-scoring gross. So if Sean Payton works his magic and the defense does what it's been doing, Broncos country may ride once again. On to the AFC East, but before we get there, do me a favor and like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. My little analytics database says almost 70% of you guys are not subscribed, and I'd love to officially welcome that 70% to the Benchwarmer family, especially since we've got a lot more videos to come, including part 2 to this one. All right, let's keep going. The Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen finally gets another weapon. No, not that type of weapon. The O-line actually protects him, and Von Miller doesn't get hurt right before the playoffs. The Bills have entered the past few seasons with Super Bowl expectations, and yet they've only made it past the divisional round 1 time. How do they fix that? Well, let's start with Dalton Kincaid or Khalil Shakir, or by some miracle, Gabe Davis, becoming a consistent second option for Josh Allen alongside Stephon Diggs. I like Dalton Kincaid, and he's new, so I'm going to make him the star of this hypothetical. He becomes Josh Allen's star tight end, complementing the star receiver, and this allows Josh Allen not to force the issue so much and avoid bad turnovers. Buffalo also left a lot to be desired with their offensive line last year, so that will need to take a step forward. And defensively, they need to stay healthy, especially the leader of that unit, Von Miller. The Bills have been knocking on the door for years, and if these things break right, they may finally be let in. Although now that I think about it, maybe they don't want to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, they've already lost 4 straight, and the best way to prevent that from happening again is to just not make it there. The Miami Dolphins. Tua stops whacking his head on the ground, and Jalen Ramsey, Vic Fangio, and company form one of the best defenses in football. Miami didn't lose a game that Tua started and finished last year until week 13 versus San Francisco. They were a perfect 8-0 until then. So they have a formula for success, they just haven't been able to see it through because Tua keeps seeing birds fly around his head. So if Tua can, not get concussed, we're in business with one of the most electric offenses in the NFL thanks to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And keep your eye on Devon Achane too. The defense is what needs to step up. The Dolphins were bottom 10 in the league in points allowed. So what did they do about it? Oh, just went out and got one of the most experienced defensive minds in the sport, traded for a 3-time All-Pro corner, and signed a new starting linebacker. Nothing much. If those moves work out, a Super Bowl is not out of the question for this team. The New England Patriots. Bill O'Brien becomes one of the best coordinators in the league and rescues this offense from the depths of hell. Watching the Patriots last season took years off my life, but that's what happens when your offensive coordinator is entirely unqualified to do his job. It was basically 18 weeks of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. But he's gone, and say what you want about Bill O'Brien, he's not a bad offensive mind. GM is a different story. For the Patriots to be Super Bowl contenders, they'll basically have to replicate the 49ers strategy. Have creative play calling on offense that mitigates the weaknesses of the quarterback while letting the defense lead the charge. That is, a defense that was second in the league in takeaways last year and just added a highly touted cornerback prospect. Of course, the Patriots don't quite have the same quality of weapons the 49ers do, on either side of the ball, so those guys will have to overperform a bit. If that happens, America's worst nightmare could come true. Another Lombardi coming home to New England. The New Jersey Jets. Aaron Rodgers helps the Jets retreat from the darkness by being his old MVP self. Less emphasis on the old part. If he looks old, that would be bad and imply that he's not back to MVP form. Whatever, you get it. The Jets are the latest team to decide they're just a quarterback away from contention, and they might be right. The defense was one of the very best in the league last year, finishing 4th in both yards and points allowed, and much like the Raising Cane's fast food franchise, they owe a lot of their success to Sauce. But how could a team with such a great defense finish 7-10 and miss the playoffs? Well, that's what happens when you have the Matt Patricia of quarterbacks leading your team, just less hairy. So the Jets swapped out Zach Wilson for the ayahuasca admiral himself and are hoping that move is what will finish the job. Or start the job. I guess making the playoffs in general would be a good start to this whole thing, but it's obviously Super Bowl or bust, so I don't know. Also, Breece Hall needs to be healthy. That's a big one too. The Cincinnati Bengals retooled secondary does its job, and they don't commit one of the dumbest penalties of all time with their season on the line. Look, when you're a truly elite team, there's a level of luck that comes into play to split the hairs of which elite team makes it to the Super Bowl or wins a championship. But one thing that doesn't come down to luck is pushing the poster boy of the NFL when he was already out of bounds, resulting in a game-clinching penalty. Did Mahomes do his best LeBron impression here? Yes, but that's not the point. Don't put yourself in this situation. Outside of that, the Bengals need their rebuilt secondary to gel. They lost 3 starters, with Jesse Bates going to Atlanta, Von Bell going to Carolina, and Eli Apple going to the Gulag, so this is definitely the one part of their roster that's felt the most turnover. As long as their secondary can at least be average, and Cincy can avoid making the most boneheaded play possible at the worst possible time, they can definitely get over the hump and win the championship that's been at their fingertips for 2 years. The Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson stays on the field, and his receivers play above Pop Warner level. Yeah, those Cincinnati Bengals, who were potentially a penalty away from a second straight Super Bowl appearance, their playoff hopes could have come to an end 2 rounds earlier at the hands of Tyler Huntley if Huntley just went low on the QB sneak instead of over the top. If the Ravens almost beat the Bengals with their backup, albeit Pro Bowl quarterback, what would they have done with a fully healthy Lamar under center? Better yet, what would they have done with a fully healthy Lamar and receivers that weren't plucked out of the break room at Kroger? Well, we might find out this year. Lamar threw a fit and demanded more receivers, so the Ravens brought in Odell for a whopping $18 million. And what do Lamar Jackson and an angry woman have in common? You get them flowers to make them happy. If these guys actually pan out and Lamar doesn't have to throw to the corpse of Deshaun Jackson for another season, a Super Bowl is not out of the question for this team. The Pittsburgh Steelers. A retooled offensive line propels Kenny Pickett to a second-year leap that would make even Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields jealous. The Steelers' defense is pretty much always good, so we don't really have to worry about them, but on the offensive side, their small-handed signal caller left a lot to be desired. He wasn't necessarily bad, a lot of his interceptions weren't his fault, but no matter how you slice it, 7 touchdowns in 13 games isn't going to get it done. So Pittsburgh needs their 2-gloved gunslinger to make that classic sophomore leap, and he's got the weapons to do it. George Pickens looks like a budding superstar. Deontay Johnson, despite being allergic to the end zone last season, is also a damn good receiver, and they've got the Muth holding down the tight end position. If Kenny can just get defenders to stop looking at his last name and thinking that's what they should do to his passes, the Steelers can be a force to be reckoned with. And if he makes a historic leap, then the Lombardi could be coming back to Heinz Field. And no, I'm not calling it Acrisure Stadium. F off. The Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson becomes the guy they paid him to be. Say what you want about putting Browns and Super Bowl in the same sentence, but that was obviously Cleveland's expectation when they traded 3 first-rounders and broke the quarterback market to bring this guy in. The problem is he was awful last season. For the Browns to win a Super Bowl, they need Watson's performance last year to be completely rust-related and not a sign of things to come. Because if they gave $230 million guaranteed to a guy whose QBR and passer rating put him on par with Davis Mills, they're going to be in for a rough couple years. So yeah, a Browns championship depends largely on Deshaun at least getting close to the MVP form he had in Houston. It'll also depend on Cleveland's defensive acquisitions working out. After all, they brought in 3 new starters on that side of the ball. Put these things together and we might just be looking at a happy ending for the Browns. Wait, no, cut that out. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence becomes an MVP candidate and the Calvin Ridley trade pays off. Trading for Calvin Ridley was a gamble, but the Jags are betting on him and hoping to parlay this move into a championship. That was all a play on words regarding Calvin Ridley getting suspended for gambling, if that wasn't clear. He really should have been traded to the Lions, if anything. But seriously, this was a savvy move to get Trevor Lawrence a potential #1 wide receiver and throw him into an offense that's already pretty good. Most people are expecting another step forward for Trevor this season, which makes sense based on the dramatic improvement he had last season, although that had a lot to do with replacing this drunk muppet with a Super Bowl winning coach. But it's still nice to see him start to live up to the massive massive hype he's had around him basically since he was in middle school. The Jags already won a playoff game at least a year ahead of schedule, thanks Chargers, and with one of the NFL's next great quarterbacks leading the charge, a Super Bowl could be on the horizon. The Tennessee Titans. Treylon Burks becomes Tennessee's new A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill finds the fountain of youth. It wasn't that long ago that putting the Titans in the Super Bowl conversation was pretty normal. They were one game away from the Super Bowl in 2019, and they won their division each of the following 2 years, including being the AFC's #1 overall seed in 2021. Then they decided they didn't want to pay their superstar wide receiver and traded him to the Eagles, electing to replace him with rookie Treylon Burks, and they promptly missed the playoffs while Brown at least competed for a ring. But hey, what's done is done, so how do we fix it? The Titans need a new A.J. Brown, and who better than the guy they selected to fill those shoes to begin with? Burks makes a massive second-year leap and gives Ryan Tannehill a reliable, playmaking primary option that allows him to revitalize his own career, open the run game back up, and stave off Banana Mayo Coffee Boy at least for this season. It feels like an eternity since the Titans were contenders when it hasn't even been 2 seasons. So if they can get back to their old identity, they can get back to their old contending ways. The Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson becomes the next Lamar Jackson, and he does it immediately. Lamar Jackson had to sit behind Joe Flacco before bursting onto the scene as the league MVP in his second year. If the Colts are going to win a Super Bowl this year, which is the point of this video, Anthony Richardson needs to do this right off the bat. That's not too much to ask, right? He'll have a solid supporting cast of Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and fellow rookie Josh Downs, and all we need is for that cast of characters to propel Richardson to 36 touchdowns and 6 interceptions while Richardson adds 1,200 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Easy. At the very least, it sounds like Richardson will have the opportunity to do these things, with him currently on track to start week 1. And hey, never say never. The Houston Texans. CJ Stroud has the best rookie quarterback season in NFL history, and DeMeco Ryans brings some of that 49er magic to this abysmal defense. This one might be the biggest stretch so far, but we're gonna figure it out. I would love to say that this team has the pieces to hide any shortcomings that naturally come with having a rookie quarterback, but they don't. So sorry, CJ, you're gonna have to do this yourself. Statistically, the best rookie quarterback season of all time is Justin Herbert in 2020, where he threw for 4,336 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. And we're probably gonna have to beat that, since even that year the Chargers only went 7-9. So let's call it 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, and maybe we squeak into a wild card and go on a run from there. Now, who is CJ throwing to do all this? Well, Robert Woods is gonna have to not be old for at least this year, and young guys like Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and John Mechie are all gonna have to be good. That's just where we're at. Defensively, this team was truly awful, so DeMeco Ryans is gonna have to turn it around. He's already brought in Jimmy Ward from San Francisco, along with Sheldon Rankins, and of course the newly drafted Will Anderson, and this injection of talent along with a brand new culture has to set in quickly and turn the Texans defense into a force to be reckoned with. So, yeah. Texans to the Super Bowl. There you have it, the path for every AFC team to win the Super Bowl. Let me know which teams you guys think will make the Super Bowl this year, and of course, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss part 2. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.